what really is happening in that space? Why are people like encouraged to eat more of like organic food? You know, where we talk about like pesticides and GMOs.
Yeah. So I think on like the starting off, it's just organic is like more healthier.
Okay.
So as you're saying, I think you had mentioned pesticides as well as like GMO, so genetically modified organisms. It's just like it's really getting food that is at its like purest, for a lack of a better word.
Okay.
So food that hasn't been kind of like modified, or that hasn't had any like genetic engineering, so like genetically modified organisms, as you've mentioned, which is basically when you alter or like play around with some of like organisms' genes.
Okay.
And there's a number of reasons why people actually do this. So I think there's conversations and discussions that I've had in the past of really GM food, kind of genetically modified foods, and if those are good for people. And but I think like science kind of says that like if you had to necessarily be like, are they good or not good? I think science, or what we are told, is that like there's a lot of like testing that goes into this. So like whatever food that you consume that might be GM or might contain GM, that has been tested. So it's at the level where it's like safe for human consumption. And pesticides, obviously, I think you touched a little on that, which were just like what chemicals that farmers or people use to like spray on their plants, just to make sure that we are kind of controlling or getting rid. I don't like to use kill, but like to control the pests. So things like rodents, such as like insects that like eat the leaves. All that, right? So organic essentially means that you don't have all of that, and genetically modified means that you're having something that has had some engineering or some kind of tweaking and playing around that has happened. And I mean, these things are done for, one, it's really about like making a lot of food. So like, I think there's a lot of like points that go into it. So one, it's cheaper. Like food that's genetically made tends to be much cheaper. It's also about, what do you call it? I'm losing my train of thought, but it's about the having plants that are resistant to certain things. Okay. So, i.e., you would inject either like certain genes of like viruses into plants just to make sure that they are virus resistant, or sometimes you inject some antibiotics just to make sure. But also, like on a larger scale, also and maybe like the reason as to why maybe sometimes people opt to go for that is like we are living in the climate crisis, and I think maybe that's a perfect opportunity to tie it in. These droughts and there's kind of all of these weather extreme like that are coming about as a result
climate
of
change.
Climate change. Of all these fossil fuels that are being burned. So sometimes having or making food or genetically modifying these plants ensures that they're resistant. So you can actually grow them in certain areas where they wouldn't necessarily be, or you can grow them throughout the year. And again, I think we're in Africa, so these conversations of like hunger and people not having food, and sometimes that is also used to say we should not necessarily like focus so much on whether it's genetically modified, because it feeds people. But again, there's the school of people that say we don't want anything that's altered, we want something that's pure. So there's a yin and a yang. So there's negatives and positives to kind of genetically modified. And pesticides, also if they're used safely. So like the other thing about pesticides is like making sure that like they are used safely and they do not necessarily like make like seep into the food, or that they are not consumed by people. So it's very important when they are used. Because again, there's reasons as to why farmers or people would use them. So it's a way of not necessarily like telling them that what you're doing is wrong. Maybe it's more of like an education on how are you using them. I mentioned just recently I'd read an article where a group of women farm workers had actually kind of went to court and had essentially said that kind of like the pesticides that are kind of like in the list for like the pesticides that are used in South Africa
Yeah.
are very like outdated, like the control or the management of just like that and like pesticides that are used or that are allowed to be used. It's very outdated. They cited about 76 pesticides that are pretty much have been banned in the EU, so in the European
Union?
Yes,
Yeah.
EU, is that what it is? And it was just really raising those questions as to like, if it's been banned in the EU, why in South Africa are we still using that? I feel like I went very scientific about it. I hope I answered your
No,
question.
I get, ne? And before we get into this, I wanna understand the thing, because this is what actually nyayizonda le nto le, ne? Nyayizonda.
Oh, we need to follow.
Where people use the overpopulation thing to create GMOs, to justify GMOs. And it to me it's like, is there really a reason for us to play that card? To create like more food using GMOs? Because we think then that is like the good way. But I mean, like cancer, which is killing people, it's because of GMOs. I stand to be corrected yet again, guys.
I mean, so there are like articles or like studies that have been done that have kind of like associated like cancer to like pesticides that are used, or like things essentially that we inject or spray onto.
Yeah.
Because again, I think it's just that it's we are not oblivious to the fact that these are chemicals and toxins that necessarily are not originating from, like, are not natural, I would say.
Okay.
So anytime you introduce that, we don't know, because also people are different. We react differently to certain toxins in whatever we have. So I might get a reaction that you don't necessarily get from it. So, so it's just that so I think that's that. So you're not completely like off the mark. There is some reading on that that suggests that. And you had spoken about like overpopulation, and that's being used as a card to use genetically.
Yeah, it's like they justify like, yeah, we're gonna like create these lot of plants and we're gonna inject them to grow fast because like there's a lot of people and a lot of people need food.
Yeah, and I guess probably my response to that would just be like people, and I'm assuming in this case these are probably like I don't know, like the people in power. I just like lose the English word now, but
World leaders?
Yeah, it's like maybe sort out the real issue and don't try and use like overpopulation as like a card to do anything. Just like if we had better management and we were able, and like countries or governments or states were able to better look after their people, and ensure that there's no hunger, and people get or have access to nutritional food. Maybe sort out the climate crisis. Maybe let's start off on that. Because that's messing everything up, not necessarily overpopulation, because it's a lie when people use there's too many people on the planet. No, it is all the toxins and all the fuel that is being burnt that ultimately is poisoning, resulting in, people having to now, genetically modify food, because again, it's like, we need to feed people, and if there are droughts and there are soil erosion, so floods that literally like wipe out the topsoil, where like the nutritional part of the soil or the top layer of the soil, and if there's floods, like it completely like washes that out. And again, thinking of like the grander scheme of it, like if there's toxins already in this and then they wash into the ocean, so that means ultimately the fish get it, then that finds a way into our system. So it's all connected, really. But fundamentally, I would say stop using kind of population or like overpopulation as a scapegoat from like really sorting out the real issue, which in this case is like climate change or like climate crisis.
I hope Nizwile. World leaders, I hope Nizwile, right? But tell me something, right? The food that is GMO filled, created, Is it farmers or scientists?
Oh, that maybe might be a question above my pay grade, but I will try to tackle it.
Yeah.
I guess it's probably just like a collaboration of the two. So I would assume like people who've studied like engineering and like can do that, then they would obviously be like, hey, this is the solution that we have. And also as farmers, and again, we both maybe stand to be corrected on this, but as farmers, I would assume you pretty much make a living out of like what you grow and the crops that you grow. So anything that kind of reveals or shows itself as a solution or poses as a solution, then you would obviously like use it. And now we're talking really about like small holder farmers or like farmers that like either grow their crops for like their own family, but also as well for like selling and making an income out of it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a combination. And again, I think maybe just to be like devil's advocates also, if we can do that, is I think it has its pros and cons, really. I think there's times when, you know, you maybe farmers need to like embrace kind of like genetically modified like species or seeds or whatever it might be, because of just like the situation. And also, but again, I think in times when maybe, for an example, if a specific pesticide has been identified to be cancer causing or to be affecting people's health, then I think it's only right that we maybe pull the brakes a little on them and do some more like studies or research on it. Because again, I think it's as much as we want to keep our people fed, it's very important that we are also not killing them in the process as well, and that people are still healthy and they can enjoy all that Africa and South Africa has to offer.